Hey guys, so for this demonstration, we'll explore two methods for enhancing the lighting in our images, one using gradients and the other involving the brush tool. So let's begin with this image. Suppose that we want to create a more pronounced light ray that's emanating from the street light to enhance the overall visual appeal of the shot. So let's start by making a selection of the light ray using the rectangular marquee tool. Simply use the dimensions of the light source as your reference for the height and width of your selection. After making the selection, click on the gradient tool and configure the settings in the gradient panel as follows. The gradient should be set to classic gradient and the gradient style should be set to the second option in the basics folder. Once you're all set, create a new layer and drag the gradient downward with your mouse to apply it to the selection. Once you're satisfied with the result, change the blending mode of your layer to seamlessly integrate this light source with the rest of the image. In this case, I recommend using the overlay blending mode. Now, one thing to remember about light rays is that they expand as light travels. So to replicate this effect, go to the Edit tab, open the Transform drop-down menu, and choose the Perspective option. This will allow you to adjust the center and corners of your selection, so experiment these settings to achieve your desired effect. Now, if you feel like the light ray appears a bit too harsh, you can soften it by applying a Gaussian blur to the layer. Alright, so now that we have our added light ray, let's enhance the highlights on the floor to add a touch of realism to our edits. So create a new layer and set the blending option to overlay. With the brush tool, reduce the brush opacity and paint over the areas where the light would naturally fall using the color white. Finally, apply a Gaussian blur to this layer to again soften any harsh edges. Alright, so that concludes the first method for improving the lighting of our image. So now let's move on to the second approach. In this method, I'd like you to observe that there are currently no light sources emitting from these street lamps. However, if you wish to add light to them, we can certainly achieve that using the tools provided by Photoshop. Now, if you've been following the lessons I've previously taught in class, you may consider an additional but optional step, and that is to superimpose artificial light bulbs into the shot. This will basically give us a reference point for the desired lighting effect. Now with that out of the way, let's begin by creating a new layer and selecting the brush tool. Set the brush's color to a lighter shade of the light that you want your source to emit, reduce the brush's opacity, and adjust the brush size to determine the size of the light emission. Afterwards, simply paint over the area till you get the desired effect. You may also paint over the center of the glow with the color white for a more realistic look. Now, once you're satisfied with the result, you may simply duplicate the layer and transfer it over to the other lamps with the Free Transform tool to save yourself some time. Now after you've added the light to all the lamps, you can then group them together and experiment again with the layer blending modes. This will help achieve a more seamless integration of the light sources with the overall image. Now it's important to ensure that the light is also reflected on the other surfaces in the image, right? So to achieve this, create a new layer, set the blending mode to overlay, and using the same color that you used for painting earlier, use the brush tool to apply light in the areas where you want the reflections to appear. You can also use this technique to enhance any existing light sources or reflections within the image. by following these steps, you've now learned 2 additional techniques for enhancing and introducing lighting effects to your images using Photoshop. Feel free to experiment with these methods and let your creativity run wild as you explore the various lighting effects that you can create for your images, alright? So thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Bye guys!